Come explore with me as I take you to the Great Depression. Imagine waking up one morning, walking down to the bank, and discovering that your entire savings is gone. Not because you spent it, not because you lost it gambling, but because the entire financial system collapsed overnight. This was the reality for millions of Americans after October 1929. The stock market crash didn't just shake Wall Street, it ripped through every town, farm, and household in America. Factories closed, banks failed, businesses vanished, and suddenly ordinary families were fighting simply to survive. But the Great Depression wasn't just a story of poverty, it was also a story of both the poor and the wealthy losing fortunes overnight. The crash of 1929 wiped out billions of dollars in wealth almost instantly. But the devastation came after the crash. Banks began to fail. By the early 1930s, over 9,000 banks collapsed. When a bank failed in those days, it was terrifying because they just couldn't transfer their money over to another bank. They didn't have the insurance like we have today. The cash simply disappeared. Families who saved for decades suddenly had nothing. Imagine a family returning home from the bank telling his wife, "Sorry, honey, everything's gone." That horrifying scene played out thousands of times across the country. For poor families, life quickly became desperate. Millions of people lost their jobs. At the peak of the Great Depression, about 25% of American workforce was gone, vanished. That meant 1 out of every 4 workers had no job, no paycheck, no way to feed their families. In many cities, long lines formed outside called soup kitchens and charity food stations. They named these bread lines. People will stand for hours, sometimes in freezing weather, hoping to receive a small bowl of soup and a piece of bread. A common phrase, "dip down," was spoken by many to get more of the meat and potatoes within the soup. For many families, this was the only meal that they had for the day. Food during the Great Depression depended on what you can afford or grow. For struggling families, meals were often painfully simple. Breakfast might be oatmeal, lunch might be nothing at all, and dinner sometimes looked like beans, potatoes, cabbage, soup, cornbread, and meat became a luxury. Some families would have meat once a week, some once a month. Others learned to stretch small ingredients incredibly far. This included meals like bean soup, potato stew, fried onions, and bread. If a family had a garden, it meant survival. Tomatoes, beans, carrots, and potatoes became very incredibly valuable. Backyards turned into mini farms. Families canned vegetables to store food for winter. Nothing was wasted. Vegetable scraps became soup. Leftover bread became pudding. Even bacon grease was saved and reused for cooking. For children, the Great Depression meant growing up quickly. Many kids went to school wearing patched clothing that's been hand-me-down from older siblings. Shoes were repaired repeatedly until they can barely hold together. Some children went to school hungry. Others had to leave school entirely to help their families survive. That meant sometimes some boys had to take on small jobs, shining shoes, delivering newspapers, working odd jobs. Some girls had to take care of the young siblings and work as domestic helpers. Yet, despite the hardship, many children from that era later on remembered something: how surprisingly close families became. Because when money disappeared, sometimes community and family become everything. Unemployment worsened. Many families lost their homes. Unable to pay rent and mortgages, they became evicted. So a lot of people ended up living in makeshift communities made from scrap wood, cardboard, and metal. These towns became known as Hoovervilles, named sarcastically after President Herbert Hoover. Entire families lived in these tiny shelters built from whatever materials they could find. Old doors became walls. Tin sheets became roofing. Newspapers sometimes served as insulation. Life in these settlements were harsh. There was little sanitation and little safety. But even there, people tried their best to build a sense of community. Neighbors would share food, they would watch each other's children, and they survived together. During the Great Depression, rural families faced a different nightmare. Many farmers were already struggling with the depression hit. Then came one more worse environmental disaster, the Dust Bowl. Years of drought and poor farming practices turned large parts of the Great Plains into dry, loose soil. Massive dust storms swept across the states like Oklahoma, Kansas, Texas. The sky would turn dark in the middle of the day. Dust piled up like snow against houses. People stuffed wet cloth into the windows and doors to try to keep the dust out. Crops failed. Livestock died. Many farming families lost everything and were focused on and forced to migrate west to look for work. Thousands packed up their belongings on old cars and trucks and they headed toward California. They hoped to find more new farming jobs, but hardship found them there as well. While poor families struggled for food, wealthy families faced a different kind of collapse. Before the crash in the 1920s, it was a time of incredible wealth. Stock prices soared. People invested heavily in the market. Some even borrowed money to buy stocks. But when the market crashed, fortunes vanished overnight, and millionaires became ordinary citizens. Lavish lifestyles disappeared. Huge mansions were abandoned or sold. Some wealthy families suddenly found themselves needing to learn skills that they've never used before, learning how to cook on their own, budgeting, saving. For the first time in their lives, they had to live modestly. Some wealthy families managed to hold on to their businesses or assets. Others lost everything and had to start from scratch. The Depression didn't treat everyone equally, but it reminded many Americans the powerful truth that when wealth can disappear faster than anyone expects. Despite the hardship, people found ways to endure. Communities became incredibly important. Neighbors helped neighbors. Churches organized food drives. Local charities distributed clothing and meals. Families learned to repair and reuse everything. Shoes were patched. Broken items were fixed rather than replaced. Many families also turned to bartering. Instead of using money, people traded goods and services. A farmer might trade eggs or shoes. A mechanic might repair a wagon in exchange for vegetables. Money became scarce, and a human cooperation became even stronger. Even in the darkest times, people still needed moments of joy. Entertainment during the Great Depression was often simple and inexpensive. Families listened to radio programs together at night. Shows like comedy programs, dramas, and music broadcasts became incredibly popular. For just a few cents, people could visit a movie theater and escape into the Hollywood films for a few hours. Kids played games outside. They built toys from scrap materials. This led to creative inventions like the tire swing. Sticks became baseball bats. And sometimes the greatest entertainment of all was simply spending time together, talking, telling stories, and laughing. Even in difficult times, people found ways to keep hope alive. Generations shaped by hardship. The Great Depression lasted through most of the 1930s. An entire generation grew up shaped by those years of struggle. Many people lived through it, carried those lessons for the rest of their lives. Even if you look closely, you'll begin to see how the Great Depression shaped certain family traditions and customs. They became careful with money, they avoided waste, and they saved everything they could. Some kept jars of nails, scraps of wood, and leftover food just in case hard times returned. For them, the Depression wasn't just history, it was a memory that they never wanted to relive. Slowly, through government programs and build-up of the industry during the World War II, the American economy began to recover. Jobs returned, factories reopened, and families slowly rebuilt their lives. But the scars of the Great Depression never fully disappeared. It remained one of the most difficult periods in American history. A time when millions of people faced hunger, uncertainty, and loss. Yet it was also a time that revealed something remarkable, the resilience of ordinary people. Until next time, have a great day and see you in the next video.